Hi everyone, welcome to Birthing at Home, a podcast. I'm Elsie, your host. I'm a home birth mum of 2 little boys, I'm a mental health nurse, the co-creator of Homebirth Victoria, and I'm a Melbourne-based doula. If you want to learn more about me, the podcast, or my work, check out www.birthingathome.apodcast. And before we begin today, I would like to acknowledge the Wurundjeri people who are the traditional custodians of the land I'm recording on in Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. I would also like to acknowledge that Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people have been birthing at home on country for tens of thousands of years prior to the British invasion and acknowledge that sovereignty has never been ceded. In episode 46, we hear from Emma in South Australia, who is a midwife, nurse, and lactation consultant. She shares her 2 hospital births and home birth story intertwined with stories of her life as a midwife, including her journey of unlearning and relearning about physiological birth, challenges with breastfeeding, bleeding during pregnancy, falling in love with your newborn, and the impact of birth-related trauma from her work as a midwife. I hope you enjoy this chat as much as I did. Welcome, Emma, to Birthing at Home, a podcast. Thank you for joining me today, Emma. We were just catching up. You're in South Australia, yeah?
Yes, I am in South Australia, rural South Australia, little town.
Yeah. Awesome. Before we get into it, do you want to give a bit of a background to who you are, who's in your family, and that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. So I'm Emma. I am a mother to 3 boys, so boy club. I've got Oscar, who's nearly 7, Hugo, who's 3.5, and littlest member is August. We're calling him Augie. He's 3 months old. I'm wife to Adam. I have a background in nursing. I'm a midwife as well, and an IBCLC. And we live in a little rural town in South Australia in the mid-north. So sort of in the middle of South Australia. And that's sort of me in a nutshell.
Yeah, amazing. I feel like I have so many questions. But maybe so for the listeners, both Oscar and Hugo were born in a hospital, but August or Augie was born at home. But I guess before we go into that, Emma, because you're a nurse and a midwife, what was your pathway into that journey? Did you study nursing and midwifery at the same time, or did you do postgrad in mid, or what? How did that happen?
Yes. I was thinking a bit about this today, and I think sort of those early high school years, I knew that's where I was sort of headed. I have an auntie that is a nurse midwife as well, and very close to her, and I think she started to rub off a bit on me, as well as my mum used to be a ABA breastfeeding counsellor. So I don't know, I sort of had breastfeeding women sort of birthing women in my head. But when I finished year 12, not heaps academic, I got the grades for nursing, which are quite low, but not quite for midwifery. But I thought, not a bad thing doing nursing first. Let's just jump on this and see where it sort of goes. I might, another area and stick at that. But it was probably 6 months into nursing. I remember seeing the midwifery students on campus, and I just remember being oh no, I want to be like you.
I want to be in that club.
But I guess knowing I always wanted to return back home, I liked the rural setting. I thought, it's probably handy having both. So let's just keep going on with this. So I finished my nursing, but I returned back living in the country. I only lived in the city, in Adelaide, for 2 years. And in that 3rd year, I came back home and worked as a carer because, I missed home so much. I really like going away for about 2 days, and then I love coming home. I could then, work, nursing didn't have very many contact hours, so I just would go down for like 2 days of uni and come back. But I just knew I had this like sort of passion burning within me that nursing probably wasn't forever. So yeah, in my grad year, I did my nursing graduate year locally as well, but I started my midwifery straight away. Got into that, and so I did it externally. Mainly did all my like placements locally, which was really great at the time because there was mid-group practice as well as core midwives as well. So I sort of got a bit of both. But once again, I was like, oh, that MGP, I want to be in that club. So I sort of knew where I wanted to go pretty quickly. And at that time, having sort of two models of care, it was very clear to me what one was, the more woman-centered one and where I sort of wanted to be. So, did mid straight away. And as soon as I sort of could jump ship, I did. Only went to town for, like, when I say town, I mean Adelaide, for a couple of placements, like nursery, which I really didn't enjoy because I just hate mothers and babies being separated. So just did what I had to do, jumped those hoops to then be able to return home and work back locally.
Yeah. And so especially because you came into the sort of midwifery world via nursing, did you have like, did you know about home birth? Did you have any like particular ideas or thoughts about people that birth at home, women that birth at home? Or
super good question. Probably when I do think about it, I probably didn't know a hell of a lot about it initially. And I probably thought like, oh, how messy, why birth at home? And is that safe? Like this was more so when I'm more that nursing brain. And even like in the early days of mid-study, like it just wasn't, I hadn't seen, well, to be honest, I have not seen a home birth until my own, like an actual being there in person. But it just it wasn't an option at that time. So I never really saw a home birth. Saw a home birth in my training because, it just sort of wasn't an option. And I knew people did it, but it wasn't something that I thought maybe was for me. So it has sort of been this whole process of learning, I guess, and especially unlearning. And that was the key in midwifery is, you come from nursing, this like medical model, sick people, and then you jump ship to midwifery and it's like, oh, well, the large majority of women are women just doing something that, we've been doing for thousands of years. So stop touching and just sit on your hands. So it was that unlearning. Totally. And I was so fortunate throughout my training that I had some really great mentors and some really great midwives that were great at sitting on their hands and, just being very women-centered. So cool. Very lucky. That's sort of how I got here.
Yeah, wow. And so when you became pregnant with Oscar, it was sort of like a no-brainer, I'm going to birth in the hospital?
Yeah, once again, it still sort of wasn't an option. Like, I don't know, you probably do know, but SA doesn't have lots of private practicing midwives.
Yeah.
And so the ones that were practicing, they were really only Adelaide. So in the city, and it wasn't really an option. My midwife who was caring for me at the time had a home birth with her second baby.
Wow.
She was living in Adelaide at the time. So I'd had her, so she was very pro home birth and, let women be sort of thing. And I had another midwife colleague that was the same. But so the midwife caring for me with my first pregnancy was definitely the right fit for me. She knew that I wanted to be left alone. But once again, I probably had a sense of fear of staying at home. Probably didn't trust the process enough, even though I had been a midwife for only 9 months at the time. But I was pregnant in my grad year. So it was sort of a no-brainer to go to hospital.
Yeah. And I guess so the pathway to private midwifery was that you had an understanding of like the benefits of that sort of continuity of care.
Yeah. And I probably I'm in this little privileged bubble, I would probably say, in the area I'm in is now it only is midwifery group practice that is offered. There's no core midwifery or obstetric-led midwifery here. It's public hospitals with a GP. So definitely very lucky. So all women, it's an all-risk model, but obviously women that do, sorry, people can't see me do rotations, but high risk. Unfortunately, might have to birth away, but at least they still have as many appointments antenatally with their named midwife, and then if they go away and birth, they come home to their named midwife again. So there still is some continuity, but obviously having to birth away if that's what they choose or want to do. But so
how far away from Adelaide are you?
Just over 200 kilometres.
Yeah, okay. Yeah. Yeah, wow.
Yes.
That's tough.
It is tough, especially for those women. I think I personally hate having to ever have to be a part of a transferring of care or knowing they're going to birth away and potentially become a number or to a big institution sort of thing, and just But I guess that's when you have really robust conversations with them and try and empower them as much as possible, but it's really hard, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. But that's very cool that, you know, I don't know how many areas would offer that, you know, midwifery care just as like, oh, well, that's the thing that's available. So like you have no choice. You like have midwifery care or you don't have midwifery care, you know? Yeah, cool. And so what was your pregnancy like with Oscar then?
I was really fortunate enough to be well. Like no morning sickness, nothing. And it was one of those like planned, unplanned pregnancies. It was like, let's have lots of unprotected sex and see where this leads. Like, you know,
and see what happens. Yeah.
You know, shock horror, got pregnant pretty quickly. But also, like, you do have that fear and or regret in terms of being on contraception for so long. So you're just sort of like, well, what if I am that person that takes 3-4 years to get pregnant, or I'm on this IVF journey and it was all from the pill or, you know, stuffing with my hormones.
Yeah.
But I remember my mum saying to me, Emma, you come from a long line of breeding women. That is not going to be
of breeding women. That's brilliant.
Not going to be an issue. And I'm like, you don't know that. Like, it might be. And so we got pregnant pretty quick. I was super well, super textbook boring, which is great in midwifery land, or it's obstetric land, midwifery land. And like just super boring. We didn't know his gender. We we're super excited. We lived in a little cottage at the time. And in terms of, you know, tests, I did a lot of the standard stuff, but I didn't want to. And my midwife certainly gave me like the information to make an informed decision, but I think I still had an element of good girl in me. I needed to sort of say yes, please, the doctors who were a part of my care. So there was, two.
Yeah.
But I remember particularly with the OGTT, like I just did not want to do it. And I didn't do it right. I did it on an early shift when I was working and made another nurse take my blood in between. And you're meant to be still, and here I was like, you know, going off, but that's how much I just didn't want to do it. And
oh, that's so funny. They wouldn't even let me walk to the car park. Like, I mean, I did anyway, but when I had it done, I was like, I got to go move my car. They're like, you're not allowed to move.
Well, here
you are, just like as you were.
Exactly. Like I'm doing this, like I don't care if the readings are wrong. It's like whatever.
Yeah.
So I did it. It was fine. Like, to be honest, it's not the best test going around, but it's essentially the only one that's around.
Yeah.
But I was like,
Yeah.
my fasting's fine. I'm going to be fine. And yeah, it was fine. And same with
Cool.
GBS. I did swab, but I didn't want to.
Yeah.
And I think largely that was fear. You know, what if I'm that tiny percentage that has,
Yeah.
well,
Yeah.
not has GBS, but has a baby that
Yeah.
contracts the GBS and gets sick and gets flown out, and you know, just a lot of that fear mongering, I guess, talk and was going around my brain, and what
Yeah.
would people think? And so I did the swab, but it
Yeah.
came back not detected, so not to worry. But I remember being really nervous
Yeah.
waiting for that. Yeah, so super boring pregnancy.
Yeah. Yeah. And so did you know the midwives at the hospital? Like, were they your colleagues or?
Yeah, so I birthed. At the time, the MGP was only across two hospitals. It's now 5.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it was between
Wow.
2. So one's a bigger regional hospital, but I was birthing at the smaller site, sort of 20 kilometres away, where I was
Yeah.
actually born as well, funny enough.
Oh, wow.
So it was still only MGP, like that. I knew my midwife. I knew there was some old ex-midwives who were working the floor as nurses, but that's also what made
Yeah.
this hospital so special. Was there was a lot of RNs. It's also a
Yeah.
baby-friendly hospital, like your BFHI. So sort of like this little,
Yeah.
like I said, bubble of privilege.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it's like your only option. So it's like, oh, it's not so bad.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, so I knew, yes, the midwives were my colleagues and or friends, and or I knew of them, knew them,
Yeah.
knew their families.
Yeah, cool. Yeah, I guess like that, probably makes a bit of a difference. Like it could, go either way, I suppose, like in terms of labor and birth, like having, like you're not going into a foreign kind of environment where everyone is unfamiliar and all of the places and areas are unfamiliar. Like if you've been there and you know what's what, then yeah, I think that gives you a bit of an edge.
Yeah, and I love that. And I obviously am a small town person, and I love that. I like walking down the street and people being like, oh, that's Emma, that's so-and-so's daughter, that's, so-and-so's granddaughter, like that sense of origin. Like, yeah, I do like that, but some people hate that.
Yeah.
But yeah, I didn't mind being in a hospital. I knew people, if that made sense. If anything, I found that safe at the time. So yeah,
cool.
His birth, so I was really happy to stay pregnant, and I know that sounds silly, but as much as I always wanted to be a mum, like, I was one of those crazy little girls that used to just be like, can I hold your baby? And now I think of that and I'm like, oh, how dare I do that? And then go up to them and be like, can I hold your baby? Because now I'm a mum. I'm like, oh, I don't want anyone to hold my baby. But I always wanted to be a mum. I remember my mum saying my 21st speech and how I used to breastfeed my dolls and things like that. So thanks, Mum.
Oh, that's so sweet.
The day I went into labour with Oscar, so my waters broke. I was 39.5, and my waters broke at 3 p.m. And my midwife and my student midwife, who's one of my good friends, was coming anyway that afternoon for 30. I don't know if it was my 39 or 40 week, so whatever, irrelevant. But they were coming anyway, and I rang them. I rang my midwife and was like, "Oh, I've shrommed. I'll see you in like an hour or whatever." And my first thought was, I'm not ready.
Wow.
I'm not ready.
Yeah. So your waters broke before labour sort of proper started.
I was on the couch with my grandma and her best friend, and I stood up to say see you to them. Sweet. And as I stood up, I just knew straight away that I wasn't weaning myself. And I said to my mama, I said to her, my waters have just broke. And her friend was like, quick, we got to go. And then I walked to the bathroom and Mama followed me and she followed me to the bathroom. Here I am, sniffing my undies like, oh, yeah, that's fluid. And then she's telling me off for the bathroom so cold. She goes, you can't bring a baby back to this bathroom. It's too cold because it was like the middle of winter. And I was, shut up, Mama. Like, be gone.
Oh, that's so funny. They're always worried about the cold and like...
and so they left and my midwife and student midwife came, and at that time, I'd had no tightenings or waves or contractions or whatever you want to refer to them as, but they sort of came and checked me over in terms of just fetal heart and a blood pressure, like just your routine stuff. And, my midwife left and she said, just call me when you need me. And then I reckon an hour later, just started to have like a couple of cramps. Was like hanging out, washing near the fire, like on the clothes horse, and I was like, oh, that was a bit bitey, and but how hard could this be? Like, I've seen women give birth.
I can do this.
How could it possibly be? Yeah. And then after the exercise, we were like, man, these are a lot. This is hard. And my mother-in-law quickly popped in because I said to my husband, who had not long got home from work, I said, get your mum to get you like lollies, muesli bars, snacks, because for some reason we hadn't packed them. But I was like, you're probably in for a long night, so just have some snacks.
Yeah.
And she dropped them off, and I remember saying to her, these are really bad. And she was like, yeah, well, you wait, it's going to get worse. And I was like, wicked. And I had done a bit of hypnobirthing, but very loosely. Like I had borrowed a friend's login because once again, had a sense of like ignorance, arrogance. How hard could this be? Didn't prepare that great. And I reckon like an hour and a half later, Adam was ringing my midwife going, can you come check Emma at home? It's a lot. Yeah. And I'd maybe been in the shower, I think, and she met me at home, and I think I asked for a cervical assessment. Because I just wanted to know. And I think she was even like, I don't think we need to do one. Like, you don't really need one. And I was like, hey, no, I do, because if I'm like 1 centimeter.
Yeah.
I cannot do
and this is how I feel. I've got a long, long way.
It was very intense. And so she did this assessment, which was awful. It's always great to be. It's very humbling being back on that side of the fence.
On the other side.
It was my first cervical assessment, and it was nasty. And she was being kind. And I think, she was like, you're like 8 centimetres, So I had contractions for like an hour and a half, and that's where I was. And so I was like, well, maybe we should go to the hospital, because it never was in my mind to stay. Went to the hospital, hopped in the shower straight away, knew water was the place I needed to be, standing up. My birth plan was don't touch me unless I'm dying, basically.
Amazing.
And my midwife was super respectful and all about that as well. Like I think I even declined blood pressures. It's like my blood pressure's been fine throughout my whole pregnancy. I'm not about to develop preeclampsia in the next 2 hours. And let's just see where this goes. But I remember we were only like 800 metres from the hospital in that cottage where we lived, and it was the worst 800 metres of my life. And stupidly sat in the front, put the seatbelt on, so I remember second labour, I was like, I ain't doing that, and I'm in the back on all fours. But worst ride ever, and I really felt like I was dying, and in hindsight, I was probably really scared, and I also was midwifing myself quite a lot. And I remember being in this shower, and I also didn't want to be in labour ward. That was my birth plan as well. I didn't want to be in I say labour ward, but it was a labour room. I think whether I associated, that's where I worked. That was my workspace, so I didn't want to be there. I wanted to be in a side room, so that's where we went.
Sure.
Was in a shower, and I just, had the shakes, was clicking at Adam, get me a bin, I'm going to spew. All those classic transitional things, felt completely out of control. went and sat on the toilet because I was like, I knew I was going to start pushing soon. And it was like, you don't want to push with a full bladder. Like, make sure you empty your bladder. Like, stupid. Just thinking. I needed to stop thinking.
Yeah.
And I remember standing up from the toilet and just being like, you know, that noise that you do when you push. And it's like vomiting, you know, you just can't stop it. And then being like, oh, my God, I'm pushing. But my body hasn't told my brain, like, you're not talking to me.
Communicate better. Yeah. Yeah.
And then I'm like, oh my God, pushing, like, and just fighting the whole process.
Yeah.
And like, honestly, I think I pushed for like 10 to 15 minutes and Oscar was earthside and I felt shell shocked. Like I had him then up on my chest. I was like in this toilet cubicle with Adam, my midwife, my student midwife, and Adam's sister was there taking some photos.
Yeah.
And also I remember when he stood up and obviously his head was coming out and I remember my midwife saying, what can you see? And I thought she was talking to me, but she was talking to Adam. And I said to her, no. Question, but she wasn't actually talking to me.
The wall? Like the floor?
It was such a tight space. So she just, I guess, wanted to know what way he was going to maybe turn or whatever.
Yeah.
I remember swearing at her like, oh, shut up. And but it doesn't matter. He shot out anyway. And you know, I brought him up on my chest and I just remember being like, what's my blood loss like? And, you know, looking at the floor and you know, you feel that burning as well. And I'm just like, oh my God, I'm so torn so bad because I did not breathe through a single thing. And I remember thinking as well, like, when people tell women to just breathe through it, just pant, like, I remember thinking, there's no way I could have done that. Like, my body just expelled this baby without consulting me. And I also remember, still coming back to me, thinking about our poor grandmother, this generation, and or people that still are, you know, put up in stirrups, told, don't push until the doctor comes, you know, just those ridiculous things. Because I just remember thinking there is no way I could stop this sensation or control it. And just thinking those poor women, because that was a lot. But yeah, I continued to sort of midwife myself through it, and that was probably a rookie mistake, because I needed to just let go, like let go.
Yeah.
So we just laid on the floor and on a mattress, and I just got to know him. But you know, I wasn't in love with him. You know, I loved him, and I remember feeling these like deep, like that deep maternal instinct. Like I didn't want him to cry. I didn't want anyone to sort of hold him or upset him. I wanted him here, but I didn't love him. In love with him. I loved him.
In love with him.
And it wasn't until around maybe that 2-3 month mark that I was like, oh my God, I love you. And probably the feelings of that labour birth. And then we also had some complex breastfeeding issues. So probably.
Had you already done your Elsie kind of stuff yet? No. Okay.
No. But we ended up with a tongue tie, and the local IBCLC, she was away in Japan. How rude.
As you do.
I was like, I'll wait for her to get home. But I just had this excruciating nipple pain every time he fed. Like nipples in a vice. It was horrendous. And like the midwives knew a lot, but they also didn't know what was going on because it wasn't positioning and attachment. It wasn't a classic anterior tongue tie. There was more to this.
Yeah.
And it wasn't until like the 3-week mark that I finally got up the energy to be like, all right, I've just got to drive to Adelaide and I have to see an IBCLC maybe hours away. And it was the best thing I ever did because she was like, he's got a, posterior tongue tie, like, he's got a high palate, like, just labelled all these things straight away. It's like, no wonder you're having a terrible time. And I just felt so validated that I wasn't going crazy because breastfeeding was really important to me. my mum had
Yeah.
breastfed me for quite some time, I think till I was nearly 3. It was just really important to me. And when it wasn't coming as naturally, or mothering wasn't coming as naturally as I
Yeah.
expected it to, I just felt like that reality and expectation was just so skew with.
Yeah.
So, he ended up having that lasered a couple of days later, and in the time I had mastitis and I was pumping and finger
Oh,
feeding.
no. Oh,
But
my
you know what? I
goodness.
got through it, and I'm so glad I had that experience because
Yeah.
it just deepens your knowledge and your empathy, but it's not fun at the time.
No. So from when you first had contractions to when Oscar was born, how many hours was that?
Like 3.5.
Yeah, holy
it was a
moly.
whirlwind for
And
first.
for a first,
And if anything, I was
first
disappointed
baby,
I had
wow.
my waters had broke first, because I was like, dang, I'm on that bit of a timeline now. Please let this not be like, and and you as a student midwife as well, like you've seen those not so good labours and births come out of fiddling, meddling with someone that has shrunk. So, someone who has, some labour, on and off labour, and I just thought, oh, here we go. My mum was in Adelaide. I actually rang her and said, like, my waters are broken. And she's like, oh, I'll come back from Adelaide, because she was seeing her sister. And I was like, nah, don't rush back. I said, this will be in the morning. Like, I'll be having this baby in the morning or tomorrow. So you can just imagine her surprise when I rang her at like 8:30 p.m. when she's like, you haven't had that. She goes, you haven't had that baby, have you? And I was like, yep. And sorry, I said, don't drive back now, but come back in the morning. But in terms of breastfeeding pain, like it was instant. Like the first latch, I was like, oh, that didn't feel great. And I know position attachment, so let's try again. But I reckon by like the night shift starting, come 9 p.m, I was asking for a syringe so I could hand express and finger feed him, because it was already agony. So
agony. That's
agony.
The way to put it. Agony.
And then you just start to think it's in your head as well, like, oh, maybe it'll get better, but no, it didn't. And it wasn't the start of the feed; it was the whole feed.
Oh gosh, I didn't like Frankie nor Murphy had like tongue ties or anything, but I just my nipples remember the pain, the agony of those learning experiences. And so how old did you say Hugo is?
Well, Oscar's 7 next month and Hugo's 3.5, so I sort of have like 3.5 year gaps. I feel I need the gap. I admire mums that just go bang, bang, bang. But
no, that's too hard for me.
I have high sleep needs, and my children seem to have low sleep needs. Look, I'd accept it happily if it happened, but I'd also be like, oh gosh, I'm in for a time.
Yeah. How am I going to survive? And so like after the pregnancy and quick labor, birth, including like, the breastfeeding postpartum journey with Oscar, did you have anything in mind that you wanted to do differently with Hugo? Especially because some mums find home birth after they've had a very quick labor, because then they're like, well, it went fine, it was quick, I may as well do it at home. Did that thought ever like cross your mind, or you were still very much, let's go to hospital?
Yeah, so I had the same midwife again, good old continuity. And we did flirt around the idea of accidental home birth,
Yeah, wow.
The first time, and we actually did have that discussion with the GP ops, like, if I actually do stay home, in quotation, like accidentally, would you just come see me at home, sort of thing? And she was like, yeah, for you, I'll just come see you at home, basically, after birth, like, don't worry about transferring back into hospital. So we'd sort of tossed around it being a bit naughty, for whatever sense. How dare I birth where I'm on birth. But I think there was still an element in me like, I need to go to hospital because that's the safest place. Or also a sense of guilt of, we do have a a good little birthing facility, do I think I'm above that? Like maybe started to have thoughts of, okay, well, I don't not want a home birth, but I don't really want a home birth just yet. But once again, what will people think? So I would say I found, in conclusion, Oscar's birth traumatic in a sense, but then a sense of guilt around that because it was this wonderful physiological birth that was completely untouched. I had a physiological third stage. I didn't tear. It was so boring. But why did I not love it? Why did I not be in love with my baby? What was that about? So I had a sense of guilt around that as well. So at least when I planned conception with Hugo, we're like, yep, ready to go again. It had become a distant enough memory. I had consolidated some of my midwifery skills that I wanted to do as well because we had gone to a 5-site MGP. I wanted to be a part of the MGP. So I put my career first for a bit and did that. But when the time came that we wanted to, increase the family, I was like, I need to do hypnobirthing and I need to do it properly. I need to apply myself and be a good student. And I need to let go. So I dug deeper. I worked on myself a bit harder. I acknowledged that I like to be in control, but I need to let go. Nature and my body have got this. Just need to surrender. So I actually did, it was start of COVID. So we actually did a hypnobirthing course with a private midwife from Adelaide and we did it via Zoom.
Oh,
but that was the Hypnobubs Australian Hips course. And once I felt like I had a good understanding of the physiology, but needed to really use the tracks, use the meditation. And that is what I did. So from 30 weeks with Hugo, I would do like affirmations one day and then the Surge of the Sea, one of the tracks. I did that then the next day. So literally every day I was doing something and really getting in the best mind space to just accept what will be. And so that was peak COVID. And that was also the other thing was like, I'll just stay home because I think that's also COVID wasn't great for many things, but there are some positive things that came out of it, and I would say it propelled home birth.
Absolutely.
And women really wanting that continuity of care and not to be separated. Like, who wants to be separated from their loved ones, their partner, their baby, or whatever? So that's probably why we joked about it a bit more, as well. So
my eldest is 4, Murphy, and so he was born in April 2020 and I had already planned to have a home birth, and so I was thinking, well, aren't I one of the smart ones because you guys don't want to go to the hospital but I'm already at home. But then the fear actually became because the midwifery business group, whatever you want to call it, that I was going through, like part of their policy, even though they weren't attached to the hospital, like part of their thing was that they couldn't support you at home past 42 weeks. And so then, as it became in that 41 weeks, I was like, oh my God, even though I've planned this home birth, what if I wind up still having to go to hospital because I go over? And that was just, that was such a big fear of mine, especially because, at that time, of course, they were saying like all kinds of crazy things about like one support person or like the partner can only be there for this amount of time. And I've heard some like really horrible stories about babies being like taken away from mums. And then especially if one has COVID, it was just such a messy time. The
mother baby diet just should never be separated, let alone remove, like women not having their support people. Like that was just crazy, and also just a reflection of like the health system not understanding, having no concept of women.
No, they just don't get it. Nope.
Yeah, so there's people making these rules. yeah, like even, at that time, I think of like women that had elective sections or emergency cesareans or whatever, and their partners having to be sent home. Like we have this benefit in the country where partners always stay in, like they never get sent home, whereas that's definitely not the case in tertiary or hospital, Adelaide, sorry, city.
Yeah, major cities. Yeah.
Even if a woman's had a normal vaginal birth, the partner gets sent home. Like to me, that's insane. Like,
yeah. I cannot imagine. And, like thinking back to, student midwife life, like you'd be on, like have like a placement on the postpartum ward and you would be going in doing those obs like every X amount of hours and you'd be like waking them up, you'd be like waking the baby up and they were alone and they'd be, like for the most part, most of the hospitals that I did placements in, like there would be multiple women in one room and they'd just be separated by curtains and like,
how crazy is that? Shared rooms. Like, what are we in, 1940?
Like, right?
I don't understand.
It was just, it felt horrible. Yeah. And now having had 2 home births, I'm like, oh my God. I mean, like I chose to home birth so that like I didn't have to have that experience, because like, if you have private health, like in the city, like presumably I hope you can get like a private room, but like that doesn't always guarantee the partner can stay for X amount of time, like unlimited amounts of time either. So it's just,
I think it's crazy. Surely,
yeah, but that's great that you get away with that in the budget rural South Australia.
Just to pull out in every room. It's not that hard.
Like it doesn't cost that much, guys.
Like, look, we're not going to have a
and the impact. Yeah, but like the impact, the positive impact that they would potentially save money down the line from like a mum feeling supported, not alone in like the biggest transition period arguably like in her life. Like, but I mean, that's not how the people that make decisions think. They think about like here and now, what's it going to cost me like right here, right now. Anyway, that's like a whole other thing. Sorry, we kind of like tangented a little bit there.
It reduces the amount that the nurses on the floor need to do, because if you've got a partner or a husband or whoever in the room, it's less times the bell gets called because the woman can, the partner can help, help with nappies, help with whatever,
100%.
Anyway. Great. Well, that's a whole other podcast.
It's a whole other podcast, yeah. Just pausing here to thank the July sponsor, Bimby and Roy. They describe their products as versatile intimates that adapt to your everyday, but they are also the unofficial outfit of labour and birth for women across Australia. Was anyone else counting their appearance in the Born at Home film? In my first labour and birth, I unexpectedly found myself completely naked, which is fine, but when planning my labour and birth for Frankie, I knew Bimby and Roy would be my outfit. They are perfect for the sweat and water that labour so often involves, and because of their ability to dry quickly, you can wear them comfortably no matter where you are labouring. You can check out all of their beautiful designs yourself at bimbyandroy.com.au. Enjoy!
So with Hugo, I knew I needed to put in a bit of effort and work on myself, and that certainly helped. So yeah, I had I say well pregnancy again, but this time no, definitely had nausea, not vomiting, but definitely had terrible nausea right up to about 18 weeks, which I didn't have with Oscar. So that was once again good to experience, humbling being on the other side of the fence, just to really understand that all-day nausea that many women have. And I also had a subchorionic hematoma with Hugo, so we were out camping at 12 weeks. It's actually a June long weekend. It was 4 years ago last weekend. And I got up, it was in the 10 a.m.-ish, I got up and had this sort of like shooting cervical pain. And I remember being like, oh, that's weird. I hope that's nothing, 12 weeks today, like, all should be well,
Yeah, yeah,
And
yeah.
then I think a few minutes later, I had this real like stabbing cervical pain, and I was like, uh-oh, and had a little bit of clear loss. And I rang my midwife straight away and was
Yeah.
like crying already. I was like, I've had some clear loss. I'm having this pain. I think she happened to be around the hospital at the time, which was near the GP obstetrician who she was around at the time, and they just said, come in. And
Yeah.
in that time, because I went to go change my knickers, I reckon, in the camper, I then had a big gush of blood, and it was just like all
Yeah.
down my legs. It was quite
Yeah,
a substantial
wow. That's
amount of blood.
scary.
And I remember, poor Oscar coming as well. And I was just like crying, like inconsolably crying. And we were with
Yeah.
a group of friends as well. And like they could all hear me. It was so awful. And there was actually
Oh.
5 of us were pregnant at the time.
Oh, no.
We all had babies within a month of each other. And I just remember being like, not excited at the time because I'm like, the odds are not good. Like, this is not good. Like,
Yeah.
one of us are likely to lose our babies. And I thought, here
Yeah.
it goes, it's me. I'm going to lose this
Oh.
baby. And so I had quite a big bleed in the camper. And then Adam rushed me in for Oscar, just stayed with my best friend who's married to Adam's brother. So like sister-in-laws.
Yeah.
And
Yeah,
I got to the
amazing.
hospital. The GP also was like prepping me, like, that's probably not good. And I was like, I know. And then she was like, all right, just stand up and let's do it. It's all right if I do a speculum. And I was like, yep, sure. And when I stood up, I had this another massive bleed, like all over the floor. And we just both looked at each other like, this is not good. And then she thought she could see something in my cervix. And she's like, I think, I'm really sorry, but I think you're passing your baby. And then she scanned me, and there's this little, I was going to say little rabbit, wasn't a rabbit, but there's this little baby in there still with a heartbeat. And she's like, I don't understand, like, whether that's just a clot sitting in your cervix. And
Yeah.
so that was a time. I stayed overnight and whatnot, but that was a subchorionic hematoma.
Okay, if you don't know what a subchorionic hematoma is, this is what I can explain. Basically, it's a collection of blood between the wall of the uterus and the membrane sac that holds and protects your baby. They think it happens when the chorion, or that side of the membranes, detaches from the wall of the uterus slightly. But why does this happen? They don't know. It's difficult to say how many pregnancies this is found in, but broadly, between 20 to 40% of women will experience some form of bleeding during the first trimester. But that must have been so scary.
Yeah,
wow.
It was. And I just remembered how much I loved this baby, and I didn't.
Oh.
And, met the little person,
Yep.
And I just remember being heartbroken that, that it was going to be over, but it wasn't. Thank God.
Yep. Yeah.
And he keeps me on my toes now. It's classic second child, I think. So
yeah.
Just wanted to make his presence known right from the word go. And the rest of the pregnancy continued to be well. I think that bleed made me feel very conscious about any sensation down there, because I remember being worried that I was losing my mucus plug at like 26 weeks. And my friend, who is a sonographer, she just scanned me at the time. I rang her.
Yeah.
She just scanned me, obviously went through the doctor, just sort of slotted me in to a time slot. And no, my cervix was long and closed. But yeah, I guess I was just any increase in mucus loss or sensation. I just was really on.
As you would be,
yeah.
But
he ended up, I stayed well. I only did my fasting this time. I didn't do the full OGTT. Didn't want to.
Yeah.
Likelihood of me being diabetic, I was like, nah. He made that informed choice. I declined GBS swabbing. And was really comfortable with that decision. Didn't feel pressured by even the GP obs. She was just like, yep, whatever, that's your informed choice.
Yeah, cool.
And then Oscar, I went that bit early, a few days early, whatever. And so Hugo, I thought I'd do the same. Another lesson in life. And it was getting up. It was very close to Christmas time. So that classic old.
Yeah, okay.
I don't want a Christmas baby, but I do not ever want an induction. And because we were all pregnant at the same time, my sister-in-law, who's my best friend, like she was sort of getting in my ear she was also pregnant. We had due dates 3 days apart.
Oh my gosh,
she's like, I'm going to beat you, because it's a race. And I'm actually a really competitive person. But I'm like, this is not a race. This doesn't, it doesn't matter. Like,
it'll come in its own time. Right. Everybody chill.
But also, she's not going to beat me.
Yeah.
So I got 40-1 and I begged my midwife for a cervical check.
Yeah.
Stretch and look, if you happen to stretch a little bit, I consent. She's like, you don't want me to do that. And I do. I don't want to. It's so silly now talking about it, but the feeling was real at the time. And she says to me, she's like, what do you want me to say? I'm like, classic multi-os, that's just saying, it's soft, it's stretchy, whatever. And then I reckon it was the next day. No, it must have been my due date. I made her do that the 19th of December because then I had him the next day on the 20th. Probably whether it was because.
Wow.
But I was trying to do my own BS as well.
Yeah. I mean, as you would.
What didn't I say? I needed to.
It's a race. I'm in it. They're never gonna know. If I cheat a little bit, meh.
I don't know. Have you ever tried to do your own cervical assessment?
I think that I did, maybe with Murphy. And when I was like with Frankie, I don't think I did, but I remember like when I was in labor with Frankie, because I'd said nobody's to touch me, same thing, don't touch me, don't talk to me, don't be near me. And I remember there was a point where I'm like, this is taking so long. And I went to like do my own check and his head was right there. So I did sort of, but like there was head. So
it's really tricky.
But I think I argue that like my belly gets really, really big. So like actually getting in the right angle, I don't know if I could like do it very well.
Yeah. Yes. Or to do well.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it is tricky. But so then I only went one day over, whatever that means once again, guest date, due date, whatever you want it to be, irrelevant.
Yeah.
But I remember just feeling really heavy that day, like really heavy. Went and visited a friend who was day 3, who had got home, and I was like, was having some breastfeeding issues as well. So it was sort of like a helpful visit, like I'm just here to hold your baby. So just went there briefly, and I remember having a few like it was a bit of a something's happening, like contraction sort of thing. And I just knew I was like, it's going to be time soon. So that evening, so I reckon I saw her late, like around 4 p.m. Got home like 5 p.m. Was like, I reckon we're going to be on tonight sort of thing. So I like watered the garden. It was, middle of summer. It was hot. And I think come like 9 p.m. I'm like, I reckon we're on. These are becoming pretty consistent. Just told my midwife. Got Mum to come out. So Mum lives 20 k's away. She came into town and like to stay with Oscar. But I said, don't come to my house yet. I said, go to my mama's, like my grandma's. Stay there because I sort of don't want to. Like, I don't. Some people really want their mum sometimes in the labour space. Like I didn't want that because I don't think she'd be helpful, but I would worry about how she feels, and you can't. You have to completely go inwards and not worry about anyone else. So she was at least in town, and I think, so she was in town, and Adam took Oscar to bed, and you just have that little pang of like, oh, when you wake up, mate, we're going to be a family of 4, and it's not just you and me anymore. And I finished work at like 33 weeks with him because I just had a lot of pelvic pain and was sore. And I don't regret that because we just had so much one-on-one time. Yeah, but you just have that little pain in your heart, don't you? Like you just know things are going to be different forever. And Absolutely. I just was in the lounge, the Christmas tree lights were on. I had like frankincense burning and
wow.
had my hypnobirthing in, and I'm like, I've got this. I've just got to breathe and let go. And I reckon 10 o'clock, like 10 p.m., my midwife came around. I was in the shower again, just breathing through, and she was like, I don't think it's going to be long, so what do you want to do? Are we staying here or are we going? And I went, we better go.
Yeah. Oh, but you set the scene so perfectly. It would have been so beautiful.
So we went, and I was like, oh, this old chestnut hopping in the car. Nah, all fours in the back.
Yeah. Yeah, in the back at least. Yeah.
And the most beautiful thing, though, was who I spoke about earlier, my auntie, who was a RN. She was night shift. She's actually my godmother as well. So
wow.
she was night shift, and she was edging towards the end of her retirement, like it was, a couple of months out from her retirement. So, and we just went straight to the same room that I had Oscar in. Didn't want to go to labour ward again. I hopped in the shower for a bit, but funny enough, this time my body told me to get out the shower and I needed to be on all fours.
Yeah.
And I hopped on the bed on all fours, whereas I didn't feel the need to do that with Oscar. And I just knew next contraction, I'm pushing. And my body certainly did that. And I felt so in control and still pushing. I just then started wailing, screaming, just felt like vocally I was making a lot of noise. There was another girl in labour in the next room as well. Like, and here comes me, waltzing in, having a baby, and left, and she was still in labour. The poor girl.
She was still in there. Oh my goodness. That's so rude. I imagine being her.
I know who she is, and she knows who I am.
It's like these women are just popping them out, and I'm still here.
When Rachel's having her baby and Janice comes in. Do you know that episode? No.
It's been a long time since I've watched Friends.
And I just remember feeling really out of control, and I felt I am tearing terribly this time. This is not good. And so the difference, though, with Hugo was my waters hadn't released until his head was on view.
Of course.
So the waters released with his head on view, there was some release of pressure, but still felt quite a lot. And I just remember begging for help and no one helping me. And my auntie was in the room as the second, and and my midwife and Adam reassuring me that all would be well, and Hugo entered the warehouse and just brought him straight up to my chest, and then turned over. Wanted another physiological third stage, but birthing my placenta that time was really intense, and I think hilarious. The GP obstetrician, she missed both my births because of how quick they are, and she lives like 20 k's out of town as well. So she rocked up for my placenta, but it just was like this. I honestly thought I was a bit going to die or have some cervical shock or something, because there was just all this pressure. It was worse than birthing, I reckon. And I started begging for the oxytocin. I was like, go get it. I need this out. I cannot bear this. So Oscar's placenta was only like 15 minutes for like a physiological third stage, and this one was like the same. So I think my midwife went off to go get the oxytocin, and the GP obs was in the room, like, just reassuring me, like, it's fine, Emma, like, bloodless is fine. So and then my birth, my placenta, and it was just this great big whopping placenta, because he was a good size himself. He was, in the 9 pounds. So of course he had this placenta to go with it. But I found that really intense. So I did have some fears coming into this birth. Like, that pesky placenta, how's that going to go again? But it wasn't the case.
And so with Hugo, with Oscar, I think we said, was it like 3.5 hours? And with Hugo, how long do you say?
From start to go.
Gosh.
Yeah.
It's quicker and quicker.
Then, Yeah, no tearing.
Yeah. Isn't that amazing? Because like that is the fear of so many women. And I can empathize that it does feel like your entire body is, well, at least in my experience, your entire body is like ripping, not like breaking delicately,
Yes.
ripping in parts. At least that was my very personal experience. That for listeners, that might not be your experience. You might have an orgasmic birth, which would be amazing. But then, like, it's just, incredible because, then you didn't even tear.
Yeah,
like,
I remember listening to some podcast,
incredible.
I think of Rachel Reed. It must have been the Midwife's Cauldron, I think not long after my birth or maybe before that birth. But, women, I started to realise how instinctive women are in that pushing space when they are in all fours or whatever, that sort of forward position. They want to keep their legs together. And I so much so wanted to do that. And same with Augie's birth. I wanted my knees together.
Yeah.
And sort of after that head comes out, like you sort of shoot yourself forwards a bit. And it's like that instinct to protect your perineum. And I could feel my body doing that. And then it was the same with Augie's birth.
Yeah.
Like my midwife would say, like, just open your legs a little bit. I was like, no. Because instinct, it just feels wrong. So then you just think about all these women that get told, open your legs. I need to see you, or you're in hysterics for a bit or something, and the pressure that puts on the peri. And
absolutely.
So Hugo's birth was quick as well, but I felt a lot more positive about it by the placenta. But I then went home 4 hours later, so at like 4 a.m. But it was, so, I should just stay home. I think that's when maybe Penny started to sink for me. Like, why did I go?
Yeah.
Like, blood loss of like 100 mils, like just so boring.
Wow. Yeah. What was your breastfeeding journey like with Hugo?
As soon as he latched, I was like, here we go again. Like my midwife asked me, she's like, how does it feel? I'm like,
really?
Okay. And then she
get that laser ready.
Like, I know how to handle this. I know how to hand express. I know how to finger feed. I know how to pump. The only thing is I now have a 3-year-old. But Oscar's a very special soul. He's so accommodating, so understanding. Even as a 3-year-old, he knew, pumping, and finger feeding. He just,
beautiful.
Never demanded more than the normal, if that makes sense. Like, he was, But, so home 4 hours later, so got home at like 4 a.m. Said see to my auntie, catch her, clean up the mess thanks, and went home. Mum was asleep in our bed with Oscar, and she like walked out. She's like, God, you're home. I was like, yes. And so she got to meet Hugo, and then Adam went in bed with Oscar. Mum came out. Went to Oscar's bed, I reckon, and I jumped in the spare bed with Hugo, tucked myself in, baby, thinking, we might have that, bit of stretch sleep now. Did not happen. I think by 6 a.m. I was on the couch again. And come out, and I was like, hey, I got a baby brother. And he sort of looked at me and smiled, and he went off to it. Then he chucked a left and went to his room and sort of got dressed, got out of his pyjamas, got dressed, sort of maybe had a moment, then came out and was ready to meet Hugo. But and it was Christmas, and
of course.
And then postnatally, I look same little. I was about to say, all tip top. No, I had a breast abscess at 6 weeks postnatal. That had surgery. Fair bit of mastitis, but it's all good. It's all in the learning.
Oh my goodness. Oh my gosh.
Admitted at 6 weeks postnatal, a breast abscess surgery. But Hugo stayed in with me, and just love, I think being a BFHI hospital, they just get it as well, either Adam stayed with me a couple of nights. I think Mum might have even stayed in with me a night. I think I was in for 3 nights, and Hugo was always with me, and in the bed with me. Like, we had a bassinet and laughed at it. We were sort of like, we used to joke that he was Hugo, not Hugo. He was a big chunker, and we're like, it's not going to fit my bassinet and he's going to hate it.
Yeah.
So I just had him in my bed with me and had support people with me
beautiful.
all the time. So, yeah, so that's Oscar and Hugo in a nutshell.
Yeah. And so after you've had Hugo, then the cogs have started turning, being like, okay, maybe I need to rethink this home birth thing.
And also at the time, by that point, I had a colleague who had done her master's and had then gone on to mat leave, but had very much all the intention of being a private practicing midwife after that. She had that was her fifth baby, and I think she'd had like 4 home births. So I've always had her in my sphere of influence, and that's who ended up being my midwife for August. And then I also had another colleague that in that maybe around like the 2021 period did her prescribing course as well to become a private practicing midwife as well. So I started to have these people influencing me. I also then had another good colleague and friend that had quite a precipitous first birth, and then got pregnant again, and just knew that she was birthing at home. She lives out on a farm, and she was like, I'm not doing that drive again. I know my body. She just fast-tracked that process she needed to do in her head, and trusting physiology and women and birth and red thread and lineage and all of that. She just fast-tracked that so quickly that she birthed at home with her second with a private midwife. So I think I had her as well influencing me, just how normal it was. And you know what, Elsie? This sounds really, really dumb. But I still just did not know enough about home birth. At this point, I don't reckon I knew that home birth midwives carried drugs. You know, I think I maybe thought that they had a bag of masks, but I honestly don't think I knew that they had oxytocin, misoprostol, drugs to help with stopping bleeding.
Yeah, wow.
Like, I didn't understand enough. Yeah. So I think when that colleague who had birth at home was just like, oh no, like, and my midwife dropped off the oxygen. I was like, oh, they drop off oxygen? Oh, tell me more.
Yeah, wait, what? I thought this was the hippie alternative. What's all of these drugs?
So, also pivotal to, I can't even say pivot. Some substantial things happened in that time as well in terms of my career. Yeah. So between Hugo and Augie, I just had a rough time, and so did those women, I guess. So just had a rough year of not great births. Sometimes things just don't go straight forward, and whether that woman's done as much preparation as possible, or you're being trying, they have no intervention. I just had some real curveball things happen, and I guess working in the community as well that you live in adds another layer of complexity, of trauma. And I just, started to lose faith in like physiology basically and this birth, and just had a really rough time to the point that so this was last March, I guess. I had quite a busy time, and I was in the labour space, and I had nothing to give, not a single thing. Yeah. And I got another midwife to come in, and this was one of my named women, like I was her named midwife, but I had nothing to give. Yeah. I couldn't be there for her. And I got another midwife to just come take over essentially. And I've never had that happen to me before, like if a second sort of comes in for the listeners, I don't know, like, second midwife sort of comes in just for that around that time of birth. And I got her to come in sooner because I knew I was not right. And she picked up on that, and she started to take over being the primary midwife basically, and I just regressed back, sort of did a bit of paperwork, and I said, I'm just going to leave the room for a bit, and I left and I never went back in. And I had 3.5 months off and got a diagnosis of PTSD, and started seeing a specific perinatal psychologist, who I still see now. But yeah, I was just completely burnt out.
Yeah.
And hadn't quite realised. So I had 3.5 months off, and then went and have been working as a diabetic educator. I just needed to go do something safe in terms of no on call.
Yeah.
I wasn't going to be in sort of these high stressful situations basically, and be with my family, because there was, you'd start taking it home, you become irritable, you become short, you are so tired but you can't sleep, and you're just not the best version of yourself. So I just needed to have a break, which sucked because I also had worked so hard to be at that point in my career, but I also needed to be a mum and put myself first too. So that's what I did, and I always knew I wanted to get pregnant. To 2023, that was always our plan. I think my psychologist probably wanted me to delay it a little bit and work through a few things. But we got pregnant. I potentially had an early miss, but I don't miscarriage around that time as well. But I think I was maybe as quickly as I was pregnant, I sort of wasn't, I think. Then sort of conceived again around like that May time last year. And that was with Augie. Similar to Hugo's pregnancy in the sense of like nausea. I did go see the GP obstetrician. Like I didn't book in straight away with a private midwife. She's a great GP ops and have a great relationship with her. So she's really hard to get into. But I went and saw her. I think she did a data scan in the room, but couldn't see much, so I went off to a formal one. And the day I told my mum, I think I was about 6 weeks, once again stood up from the couch, but I felt a bit of loss, and I was like, oh, God. I went to the bathroom and had like a bit of, blood, enough to line the bottom of your knickers, and I was like, oh, just told mum, and now I'm going to have to tell her having a miscarriage. But no, probably more so just an implantation bleed, which lots of women experience, but I hadn't really experienced that. So and Augie, I had the nausea like Hugo about to the 20-week mark again. Was only working part-time, but sort of finished up around that 32-week mark again. No regrets doing that, and pushing myself. The other pivotal thing.
And so, sorry, you go ahead.
Like when I linked between Augie's pregnancy, and Hugo's. So not only was work incredibly stressful that year, but when I reflect on it, it's like I was studying to be an IBCLC. I sat the exam. We were building a house. Well, I was living with partly with in-laws, partly with my mum and my stepdad. Hello, perfect storm. No wonder I was a little bit tired. Just a lot was happening. So it's just classic, seeing it from the outside in now. Why was I trying to portray that superwoman thing, which we sometimes maybe do, or we maybe think that other women have it all together, and just propelling that women can do it all at once, or have 70 balls in the air juggling and trying to catch. And so there was just a lot happening. So I definitely, in my pregnancy with Augie, was just sort of working 2 days a week, was working privately as an IBCLC, just with the whatever sporadic work that it brings. Finished up around 32, 33 weeks. I did do my OGTT this time, being a diabetic educator, but more so because I was just interested. I was just like, my private midwife, I hadn't, so sorry, I'm jumping all over the shop, but I hadn't engaged with Lena
That's
until
okay.
I had told her I was pregnant and this is what I was thinking. But I was like, hey, can we just you live in Adelaide, can we just do this? I wonder if the doctor will do shared care. Can we just see if we can just manipulate the system for a bit? And I'm so privileged to be able to have the knowledge to manipulate the system. So many women don't. And the fact that women have to navigate the system so hard is so wrong.
Yeah.
But I was very fortunate enough that I could, wangle things. So the GP obs and my private midwife didn't have a collaborative arrangement, which means, working together. But what we came up with is I stayed in the public system up till 28 weeks and then I jumped ship. And Lena was happy to do that because she was an ex-colleague. She knew me well. I knew her vibe. She knew what I wanted. We didn't really need to establish a relationship as such. She knew my birth history, things like that. So even though she wasn't my midwife for the other two, she knew me well. So I think from 32 weeks onwards, I started seeing her. I was happy to have scans and things like that, just your standard scans, nothing extra. I'm all for people opting out, but I just think that morphology one, that 20-week one, I just sort of want to know where my placenta is basically. If we're expecting any cardiac defects, I don't know. If we're expecting, it doesn't change. Or maybe for me, maybe if I had a placenta over the top of my cervix, it would. But in terms of any abnormalities, maybe that it doesn't change anything for me. But I just like to know.
I guess maybe just pausing for a second on that. So when you've become pregnant with Augie, you already have in your mind, I am going to have a home birth this time, all going well. Yeah. And so where is Adam in this picture?
Oh, my darling husband. Adam is so chill. He, I think the poor blokes or women or whoever we have as partners who, like who are in this birth space, obviously we talk so much, I think, at home about birthing and lactation and pregnancy and this and that. So they just get vomit all the time about these discussions. So I feel like he was sort of well informed of my thoughts. And I sort of said, I think when I was like, I want to birth at home this time, he was sort of like, okay, seen you do it twice before. Amazing. There's not a hell of a lot anyone can do for you. You just got to do it. Yeah. So, cost-wise, I think it sucks. Cost comes into it.
Especially when you know how easy your experience was.
Yes, and that brought an element of guilt as well.
It was so,
we do have a good local hospital and we do have MGP, and although the team has changed drastically with staff over the last 2 years, I would have had a different primary midwife. Because the other midwife that I definitely would have had, my colleague that had birthed at home, she was still on mat leave and had got pregnant again.
Yeah,
so we were pregnant at the same time. 6 weeks apart this time, but she wasn't available. I trusted the team there, but I didn't. I loved my little primary midwife who I did have up until 28 weeks, but I just felt like, nah, I just didn't want to be that, doing what people expected of me, being that good girl. Yes, And like I said, we've got a great birthing service, so I do have a sense of guilt. But I just also, there has to be more to this. There's more to birthing again. Yes. So I went and had care with Alina from 32 weeks onwards, and so just finished my care with public and jump ship.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And, was it kind of shared with, the people that you saw up towards that 32-week mark that you were going to be jumping ship and having a home birth? Or like, was there any commentary from people that you knew or people that you didn't know about that choice?
I was trying to think about, I was thinking about this. I think I sort of only had that discussion with people if they asked. Like, I don't think I overly like went,
yeah, sure.
home birth.
I'm having a home birth.
In the sky. But I was definitely up for having that conversation with people that were interested or asked, are you birthing there? Birthing at the hospital again this time, sort of thing. And actually no. I'm going to stay home. And I think some people were like, my close friends knew, and I think they were like, oh, that's so Emma. No one really gave me stick about it. I think I told my mother-in-law like around 34 weeks, and I think she sort of looked at me a bit funny and was like, oh, well, you're a midwife, whatever. That was it. Like, I don't think she gave it any more thought. I think my auntie, the one that I've talked about before, I think she was a bit like, oh, you're brave. But once again, a few people that did have that opinion, like my mentor, IBCLC as well, she was a bit like that with me as well. She used to be a midwife as well, and childbirth educator, but she also sort of made those comments like, oh, well, I guess it's not your first baby, and I remember she came and saw me one day, and I made a point of like, here's the oxytocin and misoprostol in my fridge, and here's the oxygen Lena just dropped off, it's in my walk-in wardrobe, and here's the bag and mask, it's totally safe, like chill. So I felt like those professionals who were my friends or my family, like those health professionals that were in my support realm, I felt like to them I needed to convince them that it was safe. So, but I never had anyone give me a hard time about it. I feel like maybe I came across sometimes like confident or competent or passionate, and so some people were just like, oh, I won't go into that with her. Breastfeeding in public. I've always wanted someone to come up to me and, say something, and they never do. I never get any.
I always make sure that when I'm breastfeeding in public that I have the best resting bitch face, just so nobody comes near me.
That matter with me, mate.
I look way too confident.
I feel like some people get a lot more stick than I did, and once again I probably just leaned into my friend colleague who birthed at home as well, just for that reassurance of like, you're gonna love this, like your world's gonna be rocked, you don't even know it. And she also convinced me, got a doula in the area, and we also have an emerging doula who does mother blessings, and my friend was beautiful. Like, you need to have a mother blessing. And I was like, oh, do I? She's like, you need to have one. I was like, they're expensive. I don't ask people to like put in money for it. Like, what is it? Like, we just can't value ourselves, enough to be like, you deserve this. It's okay. Like, put yourself first. Yeah. And it felt icky initially, but it was so great. I had this afternoon that was about me, and I felt guilty, it's like, but it really did. It was a beautiful wholesome spiritual experience, and I would highly, highly encourage people, if you've got someone that can do a mother blessing versus a baby shower, oh my gosh, there's no comparison.
I think have helped set up like Home Birth Victoria, and I posted in the group last night, like, if you need people to be like sitting in the circle because like you don't have any like-minded friends or people in your circle, like, please utilize the group to because there would be people that are in this home birth community that will come along and like be your sister in that, because I think like I've been reflecting on this a little bit lately that the home birth community in Australia is like 1%. Like, I mean, like 1% of women or less than 1% of women are giving birth at home every year. So like there's like such a small amount of us. And especially, you know, if you're in a rural or remote area, maybe you are around other people, women having home births, but like more often than not, like you are having to make that trip to like a more tertiary metro area to await the arrival of your baby. But like you're having like-minded people sit in that deeply spiritual,
it's so spiritual,
space where it's all about the woman. It's not about anybody else, anybody else's, you know, gratification that, you know, they've given the best gift or or they've like spent the most money or
you know,
it's just, it's all about you. That's what's amazing, I think. Like it's just what could like propel you into like labor and birth better than for you to be celebrated.
And you've got those safe people in your space. So I think I had 8 women. And we just did. So I did a fear release ceremony. So I had my fear birthing at home was like shoulder dystocia and nuchal cord, but not just like a normal nuchal cord. I mean like an excessive nuchal cord where the baby couldn't descend, and obviously that had been a part of my trauma. So I needed to let that go, and I needed to trust physiology and my body. It had not let me down 2 times before, and it was not going to again. And then we did birth affirmations, which were beautiful. So I had them set up in my space, and just this wholesome afternoon of tea drinking and coffee drinking and beautiful snacks, and just wrapping me up in love and strength. And I was completely fulfilled. And then a meal train, and I felt, once again, same colleague friend, have a meal train. I'm not having a meal train. I'm not having other mothers cook for me who are busy. I'm not asking that of people. She's like, you're having a meal train and you're going to like it. Actually, you're going to love it. And I was like, oh my gosh, okay. So I had this roster out, and I was like, look, put your name down, but don't feel obliged. And, you know, Phil was just like, shut up. You will accept this. And I was like, best thing ever. If I can say anything to anyone, is have a meal roster. And you might not have enough people to fill the 7 nights in the week. But if you know you've always got someone in that early postnatal period that's going to cook a Monday night, someone's going to cook a Wednesday night and a Friday night, and you have leftovers in between or whatever, it makes the world of difference. Not having to think about food or snacks or nourishing yourself. Honestly, Adam and I just thought that was the best thing ever. But and people just dropping a meal, not wanting to stay. It's not about visiting. It's about, here's your tea, catch it. And that was the best thing ever. So I don't think we cooked for like the first 4 weeks postnatal, maybe once.
Yeah, that's brilliant. And, yeah. And so with Oscar and Hugo, you didn't have anything like that.
Like, lucky enough, I've got lots of family around me, and we might have had a meal here or there dropped off, or maybe a more experienced mum in the community, some other friends that did maybe drop off some things, but nothing like a roster, continuous sort of thing. A lot more of coming to hold the baby rather than hold the mother sort of thing. This time it was absolutely phenomenal, and so much so that I know another woman that birthed locally not long ago, and I just messaged her Tuesday and I said, are you home? Like, you're not going anywhere, you're home today? She was like, I'm like, I'm dropping you tea at 3. And she was like, oh, you don't have to do that. I'm like, nah, tea, I'm already half cooked it. I'm dropping you a meal, and in fact the next 2 Tuesdays I'm cooking for you, you know. And she's like, oh, what can I do in return? I was like, nothing, just accept. The next few Tuesdays you don't have to cook. Done.
Oh, that's wonderful. So, wow.
Winding back, mother blessing was beautiful. I had my birth altar, which I've still got bits above here. Like, I mean, the audience here listening can't see, but I just felt like I couldn't take it all down, and I've left parts up. And they all wrote beautiful letters to me that when I thought I was going into labour with Augie, I read through them again, you know, really just found that sacred space again and just dove straight into it. So I had this just beautiful altar. That was a great visual leading up to preparation of birthing and, those last few weeks. So, Adam was still on board with everything. Even, like we said, we mentioned the cost before, and Lena was happy to do like a bit of a payment plan as well.
Cool.
Yeah, she's like, never wants the cost to be a reason why a woman can't birth at home. So we just sort of divvied it up into 3 payments sort of thing. Adam was just totally on board, and he's just so supportive, and I just really feel for women that maybe don't have partners like that, because it's just another battle you got to have, isn't it? It's another fight, you know?
Yeah.
And Adam did this wicked setup. Like, I'm in our room now, but on switch just a bit down the corridor, and he's a tradesman, so he's got a couple of trades, so he set up, underneath one of the basins, like he detached it and then made another attachment so the hose could just plug into it, so we just had hot water tap straight from the pool
brilliant.
Here. So just really practical, handy stuff. Around like that 38-week mark, Lena dropped off all the things, the birth pool. And it's funny, isn't it? Like I said, I laboured in the shower with the other two, and she was like, "Are you going to birth in water?" And I was like, "Oh, like, will I like it?" And she was like, "Oh, you'll love it." She's like, "You've been in the shower twice before." I was like, "Yeah, but the shower's a bit different." She's like, "Just hop in the water."
Yeah.
And I was like, "Okay, birth pool then, yeah." So we sort of had it blown up and in the spare room, like semi-blown up and in the spare room from like 38 weeks onwards, just because I guess I'd had quickish births. We were just like, let's be sort of ready.
Yeah.
But then I also had that stupid thing going around my head, like sometimes it's a ridiculous saying, but I've heard midwives say before, it's the curveball. So I'm like, oh, this one's going to be like a 12-hour later. So we just had that all ready just in case. And I ended up going the most over this time, which did my head in. And I actually was listening to your podcast flat out, sort of probably from 37 weeks onwards. And there was a couple of women, and I think yourself, talking about your experience and going like 2-3 weeks over, and just how much that can mess with your head, and it does. And Elsie, I only went 5 days over. Like, you're just like, please shut up. But 5 days was enough to really mess with my brain. So much so that I asked for the old cervical assessment. But I really had to. You're just so uncomfortable. I don't know. You're so ready to go into labour that you're not just walking to it. You're like running to it. Like, please, discomfort come at me, because
100%.
That means all my pregnancy soreness will be gone.
I saw a video today of a lady saying like, oh, like, just because you're pregnant doesn't mean you can't do things, whatever. And she was like 37 weeks surfing. And I was like, there is no way. I could barely walk. How is somebody out there surfing?
Like pretty buoyant, but
like,
good on her.
Oh my god!
It was her first baby.
Yeah, I mean, amazing. I can't remember what the caption thing, but I just saw it and I was like, "What the heck?"
The first baby, like,
I couldn't do up my own shoelaces.
I remember riding the bike quite a bit with Austin to 35 weeks, like sort of.
Yeah.
The town I'm in has a few hills in it, so I remember like still getting up a hill. But I had really bad sciatica, which funnily enough, stopped after I stopped riding a bike. But there's no way I could surf.
Crazy.
and definitely not in my
No.
current pregnancy.
You mean like your center of like, I remember actually when I was pregnant with Murphy, we went back up to the Sunshine Coast in Queensland for like Christmas or something, and we were had really been into paddleboarding, and so we'd borrowed somebody's paddleboard, and like trying to get up on the paddleboard whilst pregnant, like your center of gravity is just all out. Like, so like even getting on a paddleboard was hard. There's no way I could have surfed, even if I could.
Good on her.
Yeah, good on her. But yeah, like in terms of like, cycling and stuff as well, like that's amazing.
No,
I don't think I could have done that either. So
and this pregnancy I was even more like I didn't even do much walking, and I'm quite a physical person. Like in between babies I've like run a few half marathons, just things like that. I enjoy running and exercise, and when I'm pregnant, I'm like, not doing that. I literally had a hot cross bun every day with Hugo Augie. Surprised he didn't come out a hot cross bun.
A hot cross bun.
Yeah, I was just sore and tired, and means I've got to get the other kids on their bikes or something, and like, I don't want to do that. And Lena even said to me, like, are you going for walks? Are you staying mobile? I was like, I'll be fine. She's like, like just stay a little bit more active than what you're doing, help your body.
Yeah.
I'm like, you can't tell me anything. I'm like that worst patient, worst client ever. So So I feel like we were prepared here. Lena had sent me I think it was maybe the Birth Rebellion podcast, how to prepare for a home birth or something like that. So I just had the bassinet, which we never use, but with towels in it, and a birth kit sort of thing. And I was so ready to meet this little person. I did know his gender this time. Didn't find out with the other two, but I don't know. Found out with him. I felt like when I saw him at 12 weeks anyway in the scan, I was like, oh, that's a boy. He has massive feet. My husband's really tall. So, I think I enjoyed not knowing, and I enjoyed knowing as well, but didn't tell people we knew. Got to 40 and 4 and hadn't really had nipples, but got up to go to the toilet at 3 a.m, went and did a wee. Oh my gosh, get sick of weeing. I remember that. I'm so glad to only wee once a night now, if not at all. But got up to the wee for the 5th time at 3 a.m, and I hopped back in bed and then just felt a bit of warmness, and I was like, here we go. And I just sort of stopped in bed. I was like, oh, don't move, because I'm about to wet the bed with membranes. I then stayed there for a few seconds and then moved, got the confidence to move, and a bit more came out. I was like, oh, so good. And then sort of just did that run holding your bits to the toilet. Checked my underwear, and I could straight away that it was waters, but it wasn't a huge amount. I'm talking a liner amount. And it was clear, maybe a little bit of mucus, and I was like, wicked. So I think I actually text Lena, who, like I said, she's from Adelaide, but she then had brought her family, was staying in another neighbouring town not far away, just having set up their camper, making a family holiday out of it. So she wasn't far. So I text her, and just, no contractions or anything. But I woke Adam up and I was like, I think my waters have gone. Can you just put the pool in our room, but go back to sleep? He was like, Roger. So he did that. No complaint. Just so compliant. Got up, did those things for me.
That's brilliant.
Then my mama had passed away nearly a year now, so she passed away last June. And so I had a picture of her, had her rosary beads on my altar. And I just had this real pouring out to her, to my birthing ancestors. I knew they were with me. I just had this good cry And I was like, I'm about to go into this portal again, and I'm going willingly. And just be with me. And big cry. Maybe for about 40 minutes I just sort of stayed upright, kept moving, and didn't really have like too many contractions. And this overwhelming, like, Emma, you're tired, go lay down. So I went back to bed, got up a bit before 7, woke up a bit before 7. Nothing had really happened. And I messaged Mum, she works part-time, but she was going into work that day. And I said, can you not go to work? Like, I think my waters are broken. Can you have the boys? Because I thought maybe the mental block was the boys being home. Because I wasn't sure if I wanted them to be around for the birth. Like, Oscar starts gagging like at the sight of, I don't know, a paper cut.
Anything.
Like, I tell him, I'm like, you are not going to be in healthcare. You're afraid or something. So I actually, and he's so empathetic, Oscar, that I feel like he would worry about me. Whereas Hugo would be interested.
Yeah.
He would be like, oh, cool, bit of blood. Oh, what's Mum doing? He would actually be quite intrigued.
Yeah.
But I felt like maybe that was the block, was them being home. So I was like, Mum, can you come get the boys? So she did that. Adam was on leave at this point, had taken leave. So that morning we went for a 3K walk. I was like, come on, baby. Like, come on, body. I've shrunk before. I've had precipitous births. What's going on? I started to really get a bit down.
Yeah.
I think I was like remembering stuff from your birth stories and just other women you had talked to about prolonged rupture of membranes. And I was like just getting frustrated, but also trying to let go. Mum, and my auntie started, the only ones that knew, they were starting to get worried, like, oh, why hasn't she had the baby yet?
Yeah.
Because I'm not in labour. That's why I haven't had the baby yet.
Yeah.
And then I asked Mum, I packed the boys' pyjamas as well at 7 in the morning. And so maybe innately I knew that they needed to stay the night. And Lena come around at about 5 p.m.
Yeah.
And once I sort of just telling, because she was like, yeah, you get lost during the day. And I was like, oh, well, really? And she's like, Emma, it's a hindwater leak. Like, you haven't properly shrunk. And I'm like, oh, duh. Like, of course that's why I haven't gone into labour. Like, my membranes haven't properly gone.
Yeah.
But I was still, like, she really just helped reframe my mind. And I said to her, can you please just assess me? She's like, that's not my style.
Yeah.
You go against your morals.
You've got the wrong midwife.
Emma, I've done like 2 VEs this year. And I'm like, well, I'm going to be a third, so do it.
That's so good. That's so good.
And she did it. And I'm not sure if you ever did a cervical assessment in your training, or if there's other midwives listening, or if anyone had done it on themselves. But there's sometimes when you do a cervical assessment and you find the cervix and it just gives way. It's just like, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 centimetres. Actually, not sure that,
Yeah.
So that's what happened. And I had been trying to do my own stretch and sweeps for like a week. And I've heard people like, like I had been listening to podcasts like, just let it happen. Get your fingers out of there, like squatting in the shower. But I could not get to my cervix because the head was so low. Like, I mean, so low in my pelvis. And when Lena did do that VE, she was just like, oh my God, his head is like, at spines, so quite down in the pelvis. And she's like, no wonder you can't do because your cervix is right posterior tucked up.
Yeah.
And so, my cervix just gave way, and then I stood up and had like a bit of a bloody show and a nice sort of a bit more of membrane sort of going, but not fully. So don't know when they fully went. They must have potentially gone fully when I was pushing in the water. But Lena then was like, I'm just going to go down the street. Like, I'm not going to go far. She like rubbed me up with clary sage. And was like, just be like, just
roasting that for a little
it's gonna
bit.
happen.
Yeah.
She went down the street, and then I'd had a few then starting to, like, you know, peak, and it's like, yes, yes, yes. And I said to her, I promise I'm never going to complain. I'm going to be so happy to be in labour. And I was just, you know, when they start to peak and you're like, yes, this is so good. And then she checked back in with me like half an hour later. She's like, what do you want me to do? Do you want me to go back to the campsite, which was like 20 minutes away, half hour away? And I was like, do you know what? Go, because the best thing is me calling you back. You know?
Yeah.
And so she left, but then they actually fizzled. So I had tea. I felt really tired.
Yeah.
And so I was like, do you know what? My body wants to rest. So I went and laid down. The boys were with Mum, you know, for the night. They were fine.
Yeah.
I went and laid down. And then at like 12:30, like midnight, I woke up with just this pang in my bottom, like, bam.
Yeah.
Like, knocking on that door, like, wake up.
Yeah.
And I was like laying on my left side, and I was so welcoming for these surges that I was like, I'm staying left lateral because I do not want them to fizzle again. And I just stayed there for like 10 minutes, and they kept getting more and more intense. And I rang Lena and said, I reckon we're on. And she just stayed. She stayed on me. She went to toileted herself. She stayed, kept talking to me on the phone. She's like, I'm dressed. Do you want me to come? I was like, I reckon it's time to come. And then I was always having my colleague that had birthed at home herself come. And I text her, and she happened to be awake as well. Little people and pregnant herself. She was awake. And she just said, I just texted her, and I was like, hey, I think things are happening. And she's just like, okay, want me to come? And I just replied, maybe. And she was like, see you soon. She's like, when a multi says maybe. So
Don't mess
she
about.
was on her way, like 32 weeks pregnant herself. And my public midwife, that was going to be my midwife, who's just so gorgeous, like if I stayed in the public sector, she had never seen a home birth either, and she was just, I said, do you want to be in this space? And she was like, yeah, I would love to. So she actually lives like 50 k's away. So she lives quite far away. So when I told her that things were sort of happening after Lena had seen me, she actually came to then my town and stayed locally with a friend because she knew that things were probably going to happen. So I actually texted her as well. And she was toileting.
Yeah.
Everyone just got the memo. And she was like,
it was aligning.
Must have just, you know, And I was like, we're on. She's like, see you soon. And they all rocked up like at the same time. And at this point, so I'd gotten up from the bed.
Wow.
I was like, we get their bitey. This is so good. I had my hypnobirthing in. I jumped in the shower. Gosh, I love the shower. Adam, I was so excited to be in labour. Adam rocked up. He was going.
He arrived.
Yes, started filling the bath. I was in the shower, and I reckon, as the bath was sort of half, the pool was half full, people arrived, and I then, I just was in my space, had my hypnobirthing in. Was so happy to be in labour, and my, support crew were just quietly sitting near me. I don't think, I once again had declined things. Like, it's like, I don't need a blood pressure unless I don't know, look clinically unwell.
Yeah.
Faint, even then, you can probably say that it's going to be low for faint. Just let me be. And where's Meg? I don't know, Dove, sorry. It's good, just come.
That's okay.
And then I hopped in the water, and I normally like really hot showers and baths, and Adam accidentally made it a bit too hot, so then they were sort of bucketing out some water.
Trying to get a perfect temperature.
And but I had my headphones in, my AirPods, and just really listening to the hypnobirthing, breathing, relaxing, embracing all that was about to come. And when that pool was ready, I hopped in, and they even had the tap then on all cold, and I still was like just putting a bit of cold around me because it was quite warm. Like,
wow. Yeah.
Yeah, and I just felt so loved and supported. I was just sort of sitting on the bed, and same with my friend, and then like two sort of midwives were just beside me. And it's so cool third time because you know what you're in for, that you can also like not think but think at the same time. Like I'm like, oh, here comes that sensation again. Oh, yeah, like I remember that,
Yeah.
you know, it's going to pass and all will be well. Like, so I knew when I hopped in the pool, like it was not going to be long. I could feel myself opening and feel those like transitional vibes, like that shake, that nausea,
Yeah, wow.
the pressure. And
Yeah.
I was probably in the pool for about 15 minutes, and I was just like, I reckon I'm going to push. And I could hear then I maybe was making just these very quiet little vocal noises as compared to Hugo, when I was just like really moaning and groaning.
Totally.
I could just hear it just sort of happening. And then these little words of encouragement from my crew every now and then, just like, you got it. And I think my friend even has a photo of me. I'll send you some photos through as well, that I'm just labouring, with my head on my hands, leaning over the pool. And she said, you got this, Em. And I've given her the thumbs up, like, just full on pushing, just like transitioning, like, yeah, cool, I know, thanks.
That's great.
But I remember as head started to come, I started to panic a little bit. Like I didn't want to lift my bum up, and I could feel that my body wanted to sort of lift my bum up a bit. The water was quite full, but Lena just kept her hand on my back, and I liked just that bit of her putting pressure on my lower back so I wouldn't shoot my bottom out of the air. And she did that for me, and she sort of said, just, can you wiggle your legs open a little bit? Like, just wiggle a little bit. And I said, I can't. And she was like, you can. And I'm like, I can't. And and I just very slightly opened my legs a little bit, and she was like, just reach down. And I could feel his head coming further and further out. And then she just, gently said to me, like,
wow,
his head's just sitting there. And she's like, reach down and get him. And I said, I don't think I can. And she's like, yes, you can. And so I just sort of, reached forward, and she just sort of gently, from behind, just like guided him forward. And I pulled him up and out and straight onto my chest. And the little rabbit was a nuchal cord, so the cord was around his neck and around his body, and tight enough that I couldn't pull him. He was sort of like diagonally upside down.
Whoa,
A little bungee baby. And I called him a shithead. That's the first thing I called him. Because that was one of my fears, And she's like, oh, just a little nuchal cord there. She goes, actually, it's quite tight. I was like, shithead. And she just like unravelled him for me. And brought him up, and I called him a shithead, and he was crying straight away. And I just felt high. Like, and I didn't have that with the other two. I was high and not in pain, and like almost straight away, like, oh, that was too good, like, let's do that again. Other than like
addicted,
yes, and I remember listening to your podcast with the dad who was from America, like early on. And he was saying how high he would get off of his wife's births. And I was like, well, can confirm. It's like a drug. And I was, high. And and I just had him, after calling him a shithead. I then
gave him a much better name.
I think it's a little bit to look down at him. I do have some nice videos, and I think because it's so like, you're like, that happened to me again. I'm breathing. I'm alive. All is well. And then, look at this little person. And I looked at him, and I'm like, I love him. Like, I just loved him straight away. And I, once again, didn't have that with Oscar till around like that 2-3 month mark, like in love. didn't have that with Hugo until like an hour after birth. And then this time was just instant. I now understood those other mums who felt that. I just loved him, and he was so pretty. See, hi.
Yeah.
And it was just so beautiful. And I was like, yeah, this is August. We had already named him. And and I just sat in the water. I just sat back, and the water was clear. I think Lena wrote, like, my EBO was like, she wanted to write 50 mils, but she's like, no one will believe that, so I'll just write 100, but I think it's 50.
Yeah,
it was clear. Like, the water was clear.
Wow.
And,
that's amazing.
And I just brought him up, and I think within 5 minutes he was latching and feeding. And like my friend was like, what does it hurt? You know, considering the other two hurt straight away with their tongue ties. And I was like, it doesn't hurt. Like, it feels amazing. And then Lena touched me on my shoulder. She's like, you're high. Like, give it a couple of hours and we'll see where you're sore, basically. So
it's so powerful, right? Like, so incredible.
There would be no problems. Like, everyone would be so happy.
Totally.
And
I agree.
I think I sat in the water for about 40 minutes. And so this was my longest third stage as well. Like, my other third stages had been like 10, 15, maybe 20 minutes max, in terms of, that's quite quick for third stage, for a physiological third stage. But this time it had been like 45 minutes, and I started to get a bit uncomfortable in the pool, like, in terms of just I had quite a big pool. And I'm not short, but I'm not tall. So I just felt like I was sort of in a funny position for a bit, like leaning back. Like, I felt like if I slipped any further, I was going to drown both of us. So Lena's like, out then. I was like, okay. And then I hopped into our bathroom, and she was like, maybe try and do a wee. Like, just sit on the toilet for a bit. You know, we're not in a rush. There's no rush. You know, everything's normal. I hadn't even really had any cramps, really. And I just sat in the toilet for a bit. She goes, just stand and maybe, like, pull your cord a bit, just see if there's any, like, cord lengthening. And so I did that, and I was like, that feels, it's disgusting. Would not recommend pulling your own cord. It's like pulling out a big tampon. And I was like, I'm not going to do that. And then she was like, just squat. Like, there's still no rush. Like, just squat then. And I squat, and I was like, I think something's happening. And I was like, it's coming. And she said, like, a little bowl there, and just, like, flop into a bowl. But nowhere near, nothing like my other placentas. It felt like nothing. And just my placenta in my bowl and my baby. We then scuffled on back to my bed, and I just hopped into bed, me and my baby and my placenta. And my friend got me a cup of tea and some Vegemite on toast, and my people just sat, like, midwife sat in the room, and my midwife, who would have been my public midwife, I stayed. Her face for me is still just in my memory. Like, she was high as a kite as well. And, I feel like I've planted seeds there, and she just said that. She's like, how do you go back to a hospital? Like, how do you go back? And it was absolutely just a spiritual thing. Like, I can't describe it. And, like, sure, like, I'd had great hospital births too, but this was that missing piece, and it was unbelievable. And hopped into bed, and Adam was next to me, and he siphoned out the water from the pool. He did that onto the lawn. Back lawn. And but we just sort of hung out in bed together and got to know Augie and looked at him, and just like, he's so beautiful. That was so cool. And everyone else just sort of potted around me. And then I think it was about 6 a.m. So labour and birth from start to finish with him was like an hour and 15 or something. Hour and...
Yeah, wow.
Yeah, hour and 20. maybe. Like my placenta was longer, basically.
Yeah, holy moly. I still think it's like so amazing. And just like your whole journey as, a woman, but as a midwife as well. And a midwife having, worked in, settings where physiology isn't generally common these days, like where you see intervention time and time again, and having exposure to that all the time, being a part of that, and you being able to have such an amazing experience. Like, I think that really challenges other people's perceptions of home birth, because I've talked to, like, obviously I didn't go on to finish my midwifery, but, I have midwife friends that like work in these tertiary hospitals that are seeing all of this and they go, I couldn't have a home birth. And, such a journey to have to separate yourself from that. Be like, this is actually my journey. It's not their journey. So I think your story is very powerful, Emma.
So it is a journey, that's for sure. Lots of learning and unlearning still unfolding every day. But super grateful for my experiences. Just like, some of the complex breastfeeding things I get and things like that. There was the same deal again this time in terms of tongue tie, but it's like, hey, we know how to handle that and we know all the steps we need to do and, some mastitis. But yeah, I actually did have a hospital admission day 10 to day 13 with bilateral mastitis. That we were worried was going to develop into a breast abscess. Anyway, that didn't. But I ended up in hospital anyway, didn't I? But that's because I was unwell. It was warranted.
Yeah, but
I
like
was sick.
And I mean, if something's not right, hospital is where you want to be because they know how to deal with things that go wrong, and birth is not innately something that's going wrong. It's not a disease.
And when he's talked about your friends, like friends who maybe work in tertiary settings, I would, once again, I'm in this little bubble and I'm so grateful to have learnt in this little bubble and be surrounded by some wonderful mentors that are all about physiology, even though that is hard in the system or in an industry that maybe doesn't promote it, but are still very savvy about how you empower women to make informed decisions. They can decline things and you just write that, write that. And you respect that. Like, woman declined cervical assessment. Done. But when in even that sort of bigger hospital where things really are, unfortunately, women do become very much so a number. It breaks my heart for sure. To experience Augie's birth and just be like, man, this is how good it can be, and if only everyone could experience this. Or even if they did have to have a hospital birth for some reason, if they had become unwell or there was some really rare issue or whatever, anomaly or something, why does it have to be so hard that, should be respected and spoke to nicely and given informed consent and kept with their baby at all times and just things like that. We just need to do better, basically. But I'm so happy to share my story and
and that you listen to the podcast as well.
I listened to pretty much every episode leading up to my birth, and then I even listened to a few of the latest ones leading up to this recording. I think it's a great thing that you're doing.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you for taking the time away from baby Augie. And thank you, Augie, who can't hear me at the moment, but sending good vibes to Augie. Is there anything else to finish up that you'd like to add or anything like that?
Thanks for providing a wonderful platform for women to share stories, and share their experiences, and if, someone just stumbles across it and, learns a bit more, hears a bit more, and just know that they have options. That's what it really comes down to, isn't it? We've got options and it's within our right to choose. So thanks for spreading the word, basically.
Yeah. Absolutely. Thank you so much, Emma.